Richard, where are we at?
We're at Wilson Valley Mercantile. We're checking out the seed to sip whiskey that we tried on the podcast, and we're going to wander around, see what kind of trouble we can get into. I'm excited about this. It's like a farmhouse, and we're actually going to be learning where everything starts and how everything finishes. So they're growing their own grain, they're doing everything themselves. It's a survival of the family farm. So I'm hoping we're going to get some good content.
Howdy, y'all. What's happening?
Well, here we are. We're at Wilson Valley Mercantile, talking to John and Erica. Yeah, Erica's been telling us about all of the interesting things all around here. And 4 generations?
I'm 5th. My kids are 6th.
Wow. What are some of the challenges? Because I know in farming, I've seen this a lot where JT Mellick is doing this in Louisiana, where they're trying to, they're making rice crops, and they're rotating their crops with crawfish. They're trying to keep their family farm alive. Do you have the same types of struggles? Is this why this distilling operation is here?
Well, that's ultimately what brought about the idea. I mean, the first idea to start this really wasn't about making bourbon or whiskey. It was about what can I do to make corn worth more money. And that's probably 5, 6, 7 years ago. I really can't tell you how long ago it was off the top of my head, but quickly it went from what can I do to make corn worth more money to well, bourbon, that's kind of interesting. I like bourbon. Surely I can figure that out. Apparently I did. And it quickly became more so, how can we tell our story, and what can we do to showcase the things that are unique about us, and how we got here and how long we've been here, and what maybe some history about the area, and just anything and everything that we can do that's interesting.
Your family farm, has this been divided and subdivided? I know that this happens a lot in farming. Like every generation that comes along, it's like, I don't want anything to do with the farm, sell off my parcel, cut it in half.
So not quite. Guess from that aspect, I'm in a little bit of an interesting situation. So my father was an only child, my grandfather was an only child. And so at least 2 of the generations, well actually my great-grandfather wasn't an only child, but he was the only one that farmed. The reason for the name, the company being named Wilson Valley Mercantile, so Wilson Valley is the area we live in. 6 Wilson brothers settled here in 1866, 1867. One of those would have been my great-great-grandfather.
Okay.
And one of his daughters married an Evans, which they moved in a little bit later, or around the late 1800s, early 1900s. And they were involved in, several of them were involved in the general merchandise business. So that's where the mercantile name came from. In fact, there's here just about 1.5 miles away in Little River is I guess antique building, you can call it, built in about 1911 by one of my great uncles.
Is that where the cash register?
So yes, the cash register and the safe both came in there. He was J.E. Evans. Interesting thing about the cash register, we had a gentleman that retired, I think 40 years he spent working for National Cash Register. This was late last year. Came in and said, if you can open the top drawer on that cash drawer, there'll be a tag underneath there, if it's still there, that says when it was built and who it was built for. Well, that quickly became a challenge, so I dug it out, opened up, figured out how the mechanism, because I really had never looked at it very much. Most of my life it's set in a storage container.
Right.
Until we opened this place up and had somewhere to show it off. And sure enough, I got that top door open, and it doesn't say when it was built, it was warranted until 1912, so I assume somewhere around 1911 it was built, and it was built for J.E. Evans. So it was, purpose built for that general merchandise store.
I bet you it was a pretty penny at the time.
I'm sure it was. I'm probably worth a fair bit now if it was restored, but
yeah.
it's worth a whole lot more to me in history than it is in dollars. So.
Yeah, that's incredible that you're able to keep all of this family history in the same place.
157 years in the same spot, you accumulate a lot of stuff.
Well, that's fun. This building, how old is this building?
So we poured the foundation for the distillery in May of 21. It was purpose built specifically for this. It wasn't something that we modified to fit this purpose. Myself and 2 of the gentlemen that worked with me built this building ourselves. One of them's passed away since then. The other one, he's my right-hand man. He's the one who's currently working while we're sitting here talking about all this stuff. So keeping everything going the right direction.
So you're saying single, only child. farms take a lot of people to make them work. Where do all of the farmhands come from?
So other families, I mean, there were multiple families that lived on the property. Past my father's generation, I don't know how all that worked. I just know this is where it was. There was a community here originally in that late 1800s. The railroad, however, came through and they built a depot in Little River. They didn't want to, originally they were going to build it here in Wilson Valley, and Little River's about a mile and a half away. They ended up building the depot there, so everybody migrated that direction, and the only people that were left down here were the farmers themselves. But there were a couple of, or as I've read, there were a couple of general stores and other businesses here in the valley. I don't know where they were. The only thing I know for a fact is there's a blurb. I wonder if it was I think it was in an obituary, maybe for my great-grandmother, that talks about that her great-grandson, who would have been my father, or excuse me, her grandson, who would have been my father, was farming most of the area that was the Wilson Valley community. And currently down here, I farm everything that my dad did. So
the mechanization, the tractors, it's all going to help you do more
oh, absolutely.
with less.
You talk about even 50, 60, 70 years ago, you know, a good day of running across ground might have been 40 acres. You know, there's very few things that we can't do a whole lot better than that. I mean, there's some processes right now, our planter, we can plant 40 acres an hour.
Okay.
As opposed to 40 acres a day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know if you're talking about 1 or 2 row equipment and mule, you could work all day and still walk across the area that you worked in that day. Whereas it'd been an awful long walk if you want to do that today. I mean, if we can get things lined out and have all the inputs where we need them, when we need them now, I mean, we may not average 40 acres across every hour of the day, but we can sure scare it to death if you're not having to stop and refill. And
so what kind of grains and corns are you growing on the property?
So historically, we've always had corn, wheat, and oats. Corn would be a number 2 yellow dent. Nothing very exciting or special about it. Most of our corn was marketed as deer corn as opposed to into the feed market. So a little bit of a niche market, and some things we do on the harvesting side, particularly to make sure that it's clean enough to go right in a sack for a deer. If you spend the time, you can set a combine where it'll clean a crop, assuming conditions are right. Wheat and oats wise, both hard red winter wheat and winter oats. So that's the things that our first mash bill started with. So the 3 bottled, we call them seed to sip. So we're handling everything from the seed going in the ground all the way to it being served here in the tasting room. So that's the 3 grains we had to work with to start with. So that's where Broken Post white whiskey, Texas 3-way bourbon, and Texas Notch bourbon all get their mash bill from.
Handling the grain can be a little bit unknown for a lot of people that are watching this. Corn is really wet. How do you get it dried out and milled and put through a mill?
The nice thing about Texas is it does that. The environment does that for us. There's lots. If you talk about another part of the world where there's lots of corn grown in the Midwest, they may start harvesting corn at high moisture, which 20+% moisture, which if you put that in a grain bin, it's going to mold and be nasty and gross and rot. For the most part, we start harvesting in the neighborhood of about somewhere around 14.
So it's dry in the field?
It's fairly dry in the field. That's the moisture. The moisture content really needs to be below about 13.5 to be able to store it without having to add air to it, okay, to dry it. So that's one good thing about being in this part of Texas that gets hot as hell is the environment does the drying for us. Now, if it's a particularly hot summer, that moisture can start at at 13.5, 14%, and a week later it could be 10%. There are some other caveats to the environment, but it's one thing at least we may not get the yields that you see in the Midwest, but because of the environment, but we do have some benefits to it.
This tasting room is fairly active on the social media. On the weekends, I guess you have bands and people coming in here.
We have live music just about every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We do a singer-songwriter roundup that's hosted by a gentleman named Ely Buck Davis. He brings in people on first and third Thursdays. We do an open mic night on second and fourth Thursdays, and then every Friday and Saturday we've got either solo acoustic or a band, some kind of entertainment. And if there happens to be an oddball fifth Thursday, we do a game night or a movie night or some form of entertainment.
So the tasting rooms, if you were going to be suggesting to somebody, what type of entertainment or food and food trucks, things like that to bring people to your location, what have you found is successful in bringing people to visit Wilson Valley?
I think the music has been, it keeps them in the seat a little bit longer and gives them something to enjoy and gives them a memorable experience. The other things, we just try and tell our story. You know, family's been squatting here for over 150 years. One unique thing, I think, I don't know if there's anywhere else in the country, maybe in the world, that you can do it. Surely there's somewhere, but I don't know of it, where you can come have a bourbon and have a steak or have a hamburger. The main inputs for those things came from the farm itself.
So you're doing cookouts as well?
So we have a small kitchen, yes. We don't have an extensive menu, but we do sell burgers made from our own beef. Got several hot sandwiches, paninis, excellent poutine. I think elevated bar food is the term that's been used to describe it.
So let's take a look around the property. I know there's a couple things that I wanted to see on the distilling side, and
Sure.
Let's go along on a little adventure together and
Yeah.
tell us a little bit more about yourself.
I don't know what's worth telling about me. It's not a very exciting story. I'm just a dumb farm kid who went to college and and after I graduated college, I was in IT for 18 or so years.
In IT, a dumb farmer in IT.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's actually one of the stereotypes. You've got to be an engineer, you've got to be a social media manager now you're a restaurant bar manager, you're running so many things, and now you're a distillery operator on top of a farm operator. You can't just sit there and say dumb farm kid.
Well, I think so I was in a similar interview. It was actually for print several years ago, and I referred to myself as the manager of chaos. So that's really what I do, is I just manage the chaos. I point the direction that we need to go, and we go from there.
You're really stuck with the seasonality as well. You were saying, you're not distilling right now, but you're relying on seasons, you're relying on the grains coming out of the field. You have to have the product, you also have to have the downtime. So tell me a little bit more about how you manage that.
Well, any given day, you just do what you've got to do. Some days they're really, really long and maybe a lot of unpleasant. Some days they aren't so bad. Yesterday I was sitting on a combine for about 9 hours harvesting an oat crop that's flat on the ground, which is less than ideal. And there's nothing fun about sitting in a combine for 8-9 hours at 1.5 miles an hour. If the weather had been a little different this year, we'd be running 4.5 miles an hour. And instead of covering 7 acres an hour, we'd be covering 23, 24, 25 acres an hour.
So your oat was on the ground. Was it pounded down by the weather?
Wind, heavy rain, which I hate to complain about rain. We've kind of gotten a little bit of a reprieve here the last couple of weeks, so that's nice. We can do a little bit of farming at least. But that's really what's one nice thing about this. If it's too wet or the weather's too bad to do any farming, then we can come here and work on something.
This is the main reason why I wanted to come here, is I wanted to show, where these things come from. A lot of times when we're talking about things, we talk about corn, and we miss the varieties of corn. We miss the varieties of grains and how they get put together, the struggles of getting the product put together. This is all done in one place, which is different than most other places. They're bringing in things from the farms in large tractor trailers or on train loads of grain and corn. And it seems romantic when you're looking at a small farm, but this is hard work, and we appreciate what it is that you're doing. And that's the main reason why we wanted to come here. You've got some barrels out here aging?
So I do. Barrels, pews, tables, all kinds of stuff out here. We're currently in the midst of working on some pallet racking where we can be a little bit more efficient with our storage. Right now out here is the first 40, not the first 40, it would have been the first 50 barrels. We've dumped about 10 barrels in the course of the last year and a half to meet the demand. I want to age everything as long as I can possibly, or as long as makes sense.
The whiskey that we tried, that Jake Clements brought in, I think that was 1 year old?
It is. So at this point, we haven't bottled anything that's older than a year. I made the decision on the front end that I wasn't going to take anything out of a barrel less than a year old. Currently, the oldest make I have is right at 18, or I guess 19 months now. We'll probably do a 2-year bottling of some of those whenever the time comes, and then go from there. One reason I've chosen not to be in distribution is I don't want to be on the hook to have to supply bottles to somebody. I definitely don't have the time for that kind of commitment back here. I mean, currently I run production 1 day a week when we're running. It's hard to do that during the summer months just because of how busy the farm is. I got multiple harvests that happen between the middle of May and ideally, if everything goes right, the end of August. So it's a time prioritization thing.
So not in distribution. That means you have to come here to try and drink this whiskey or buy it here.
That's right.
You can actually take it home.
You can take bottles home. I do want to tell a story about the pew since it's sitting out here
Sure.
in plain view of the barrels. It's actually going to end up inside. We just haven't rearranged yet. So I don't know, a month and a half ago, saw a message on Facebook Marketplace that the church that we went to as a kid was getting rid of all the pews and going to tables.
Okay.
Well, or not tables, excuse me, chairs. Well, I went up there and I said, I want the fourth one from the back. They're like, why do you want the fourth one from the back? Because that's the one we sat in. So that's our pew.
Wow.
That's that we sat in as a family growing up. So
cool. The barrels look to be 5 gallon, 25 gallon.
we have 5s, 15s, 25s, and 30s right now.
Okay.
And some of that's experiment, some of that is COVID and just whatever we could get when the time came.
Yeah, that's a struggle because a lot of the distributors stopped handing things out to the little guy because they needed to pay the big guys.
That's very true. Yeah, we had a hard time getting barrels about this time a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that's gotten a little bit easier. I actually was looking at ordering some barrels about a month ago, and I thought, you know what, we're fixing to shut down for the summer.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've got just enough to get me to the point that I want to be in before I shut down, so I chose not to order. I'll get some in the fall, late summer, fall, whenever it makes sense to do it so we can get fired back up.
Glassware was also a struggle because during the shutdowns, China and Italy were the main sources for glassware, and those factories were shut down permanently. And as they got back online, you're going to take care of your multi-million-dollar clients before you.
Well, yeah, take care of your bread and butter for sure.
Yeah.
We actually didn't struggle so much with the glass. I didn't know what I was going to need on the front end, and I overbought. I still have glass, so we're in good shape for some time on glass. So.
Perfect. Well,
let's go back in production.
Yep.
One thing I want to say, I had never built a building like this, of this scale ever before, so I can say without a doubt I never need to build another 7,600 square foot building ever again in my life. But I will say that I feel like I really accomplished something whenever all the floor drains came out in the right spots in relationship to everything else in the building. So
yeah.
that made me feel like I'd accomplished something.
So all of your equipment here and the way that this is pieced together is found objects, or is it something that was purchased for to suit?
So most of the production equipment was purchased with intent. I've got a few pieces here or there that we picked up. After starting production, to make life a little bit easier. But for the most part, all the production equipment, the big stuff, the mash tun, the still, fermenter, boiler, glycol chiller was purpose bought for this facility. We did build a lot of things ourselves.
This in front of us looks like something that was built.
It is. I'm pretty good at coming up with ideas, and I mentioned Chris earlier. I don't know if I said his name, but Chris Sutherland is my right-hand man. He's pretty good at fabricating. Between the two of us, we come up with some pretty interesting things to build. So the stands we did build for our grain handling. We got a set of scales on each stand. We use these black boxes. They're called pro boxes or buckhorn bins. They're the same kind of boxes that we get seed in, corn seed, whenever we're going to plant.
Okay.
So we have them around. They're easy to handle. So I thought, we'll build a set of stands that will make them easy to make the grain handling operation. I don't have to worry about trying to, dump stuff out of a bag or, so one somewhat unique aspect of us is we can handle a lot of grain efficiently bulk, but handling it in smaller forms is really and truly a pain in the butt. I don't like bags of seed. I like boxes of seed because it's open a slide. It's not open 1,000 little bags by pulling a string on them and dumping them out.
Right.
So
this is actually probably lifted up here with a forklift.
It is.
So you bring it down, fill it with grain, lift it back up, and now you have a hopper system that goes into your mill.
My mill, yes sir. Story on the mill, a lot of things in the distillery all the way around were Facebook Marketplace finds. I found the mill probably a year before, laid the foundation for the building. but it came out of a bakery in San Antonio that had closed down. It was definitely during COVID that I found that, and I don't know if it was something that was shuttered by COVID or if it was something else, but found that mill. Grist mill is in good shape. The price was right. That's the key thing. The price was right.
Yeah, yeah.
And so had that and built everything else around it to fit.
Okay, so we've got the grain up here, we've got the mill here, and it looks like it's feeding into...
We've got an auger that feeds it into the mash tun.
Into your mash tun. Cool.
So whenever we're mashing, we start with whole grain, by weight, mill it, mash it, then cook it.
Okay, so your mash tun has a drain on the bottom. Is that fed to the other side of the building?
To the other side of this wall, which I wanted to keep the grain handling and milling separate from distilling. A couple of different reasons, mostly just keep the dust out of there as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So after we've mashed, there's a pump on the other side of the wall. We pump it in the fermenter over there.
Okay, so we're going to go from the mash tun to the fermenter next. This is actually really cool to see step by step how this is going. I see your little scales here attached as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's where this is all going to get pumped over here.
Yep, so it'd be pumped into the fermenter. Our production schedule, we normally run 1 day a week, every Thursday, 300-gallon batch. The still behind us here is 150-gallon still, so it's got to run twice for every batch, which makes the production day a little bit on the long side, but I don't mind long hours. Mash will sit in the fermenter while the yeast does its thing for right at a week. It is open top.
Yep.
Sadly, there's nothing in there to see or smell at the moment since we are shut down, but...
So after we do the fermentation and we've got alcohol, you're probably sitting around 8 to 10% alcohol by volume.
Shoot for right about 10%. That's one reason that works nicely with a 300-gallon batch. That 25 to a 30-gallon barrel, they work real well to run a weekly batch if we want to change up. Okay. That's one really nice thing about being a farmer too, is that if I want to, the wind blows me this way and I want to distill something, I'm thinking about distilling something new next year, I can plant the grain for it this year and make the decision. It's also a double-edged sword because this year all of my specialty crops I planted in a low-lying area because well I thought it was going to be good, but then we got record rainfall for the last 3 or 4 months and they all drowned out. So in 2 years I won't say nothing interesting, I'll have nothing special and interesting coming out because I don't have the grain to do it with.
Cool. And then so the ferment is going to go into the still. Are you going pot still first and then column still?
So I've experimented going both ways. I prefer just to run it column still.
Okay.
That's been the best, I won't say use of my time.
Mm-hmm.
I experimented doing stripping runs and then running it as a column still later, thinking maybe I could save a little bit of time that way. Best as I can tell, there was not any significant difference in it either way, and it didn't save enough time to justify doing it.
On the column, are you doing anything specifically different in terms of pulling off your heads?
As much reflux as I can possibly run.
Okay.
I want it to be, I hate saying pure, I hate saying clean, but I want it to be as refined as possible whenever it makes it through the process.
Okay. And that's something that actually happens here in Texas. If you have too much tails, you just don't have the time in the barrel to age out some of those barnyard funky, interesting notes. So having a cleaner spirit going into the barrel, you're going to have a cleaner spirit coming out of the barrel. The maturation with the oak is going to be not faster, but more intrusive because of the climate changes. And so how are you mitigating that? Are you just hoping and praying, or?
Currently hoping and praying, trying to keep an eye on what's going on, do barrel tastings, I won't say on the regular, but at least quarterly or so. In fact, we did one Thursday evening about 2 or 3 weeks ago. We had some of our close friends here who help a lot. One evening, and we weren't particularly busy, so we decided to taste a few things, see how they were coming along. That's how I know how that 19-month Texas three-way is quite delicious.
Yeah.
So I don't think we probably won't be doing many more of the super small barrels. The 5 gallons, they leak really badly. I really don't like wasting product, so they look pretty, and they'll probably just be decoration from now on.
So we're going to be moving to 15 and 25.
I think going forward, I won't do anything less than a 30 is my intent, and probably move up to some 53s as well.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, the stuff that we've been tasting, and we're gonna do some tasting after this. So we'll revisit and see how this is going. So from here, it's going to end up going into barrels, and it goes on the other side. Is there any other thing in here that you wanted to point out or let us know about?
That pretty well covers it. There's not there. I don't want to say there's not anything else exciting, because there are other interesting things, but I think that's the highlights for the most part.
Cool. Well, this is quite the endeavor, and we thank you for hosting us and showing
Absolutely.
us around
We're glad to do
your distillery. Maybe we'll look around the property a little bit later, and let's go back and see what we can drink.